welcome to episode 50 of the Dental Realist podcast. I am Dr. Ryder Waldron, and I am joined as usual by Dr. Marcus D. Neff and Dr. Troy Stevens. Troy, how's it going tonight?
Going really well. Episode 50 is nice because I think Marcus's birthday is coming up 50 isn't here pretty quick.
Not quite.
Marcus, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been a good day. A little hot over here in this part of the state, but it's summer, so we'll take it.
Yeah, no, we won't. I will not
No, we
take it.
love
I'll take
heat,
winter
Ryder.
anytime. I
We
would
love
take a
heat.
Wisconsin winter over a Utah summer anytime. So for episode 50, we thought we'd bring on one of our favorite guests, and Brian Trecek is the Director of Admissions at Marquette University School of Dentistry. He's also probably mostly responsible for letting the three of us into dental school. But we thought we'd get on and discuss how the admissions process is and everything with Brian during this pandemic. So, Brian, how are you doing tonight?
Great. It's great to be back on the podcast, guys. I was trying to think. I think this is actually maybe only the second time I've been on the podcast, and I don't know how many years ago it was, but I'm happy to be back, and thanks for asking.
Yeah, so it was episode 12 you were on before, and it was 2016, and it's still one of our most downloaded episodes. So dental students eat this stuff up.
Good.
So, well, let's get into some questions and talk about how things are going at dental school right now. So, Brian, can you tell us how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected dental school applications? You seen them go up, go down, any change at all?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Of course, you guys understand that we're in an interesting time period in the cycle for dental school. So it's kind of like on one hand, where we start dental school at the end of August. August 24th is going to be our first day of school this year. So in a lot of ways, right now we're very consumed with orientation, sort of onboarding this incoming class, but in June is when we started receiving applications for this next cycle, for the 2020-21 cycle. So I think your question is probably more appropriately answered in what we think or forecast might happen for this next cycle, the one that's starting right now. And all I can tell you is I think it's probably a little too early to tell. I did a little prep work for getting ready for tonight, and I can tell you that at our school at Marquette, we are 11 applications behind where we were on the same date last year. So
Wow.
At this point, I would say that's good news. We don't see this, enormous decrease in the people that are applying, and there's still a lot of applications that are in progress. Our school is, as some of your listeners may know, you guys know, we're a private dental school, so we get applications from all over the country. We finished with a little over 2,400 applications last year. Right now, we have about 1,400 applications in-house already for next year. So it might be a little bit too early. I tend to be a glass half empty, a little bit pessimistic guy, but look like it's going to be okay, at least in terms of interest in our school. And that's really good. I'm happy about that.
Gotcha.
So it sounds like you're right on track, and things are pretty much staying in the same ballpark where they have been.
Yeah, you guys. Again, I always kind of tell you when you ask questions that I can really only answer them with confidence in the context of our own school. One of the things that I found amazingly interesting this year, and I always hate, I don't want to get too admission easy for your crowd, but with COVID, there's two things that happened in this current cycle for the class that's coming in August that at our school I never ever would have predicted this year. One is the yield on our offers of admission. So we make offers of admission, right? That doesn't mean everybody we admit comes. The people we're admitting are people that are good candidates. Lots of schools are in. But our yield on offers this year was as high as it's been in the last 9 years. On top of the fact that schools always talk about melt, right? Someone pays a deposit to come. That doesn't necessarily mean they come. They might offer admission to an in-state school later. This summer, we've had the lowest melt at Marquette in the last 8 years. So increased yield, lack of melt in the middle of a pandemic are two things that from an enrollment perspective are really good that I never would have predicted. And I have a sense that if that happened at Marquette, it probably happened at a lot of schools across the country. People made their choices and they stuck with it this year.
Yeah. So, has it changed any of the application process? Are you doing interviews in person, doing them on Zoom or these online resources?
Yeah,
How has
yeah,
that been going on?
Troy, I think that you're going to find the majority of schools, certainly our school at Marquette, the biggest change, the biggest, I guess, concern, fear, that's maybe a strong word for me, is all of our interviewing this year has to be done virtually. We waited as long as we could wait. The real problem with doing an in-person interview day, at least the way we do them, is the big problem with schools is we have these limits on how many people can be in a certain space. And that's affecting the way the curriculum runs, and it's also affecting the way we would do an interview day. We're also nervous about travel plans and being able to find hotels and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're going to be doing our entire interview day cycle virtually this year, and that'll challenge us a little bit. But there's a lot of schools that did virtual interviewing deep into the spring this year. So we're all kind of trying to get a handle on what schools will share the sorts of things that they did, how to do them. We'll probably use Zoom. That's the way in which we'll do things, and try to mirror what we do in person in a virtual sense as best we can.
Brian, how do you typically go about selling Marquette as a school that people should apply to? Do you go out and make visits typically? And this year you're not?
I've always said that, and I never really have a great sense of what other places do. But yeah, I'm an old man and I've been around a long time. But I've always felt that our school's not like we're not like Kentucky or Duke in basketball or Kansas, where we're just plucking all Americans off the list. We got to go find people, and so yeah, this is going to be the first fall, September through Labor Day through Thanksgiving, where I'm not going to be sleeping in as many Hampton Inns traveling across the country visiting schools as I've been used to. So
Hampton Inn? I thought you were a Ritz-Carlton guy.
No, yeah. Hey, man, I work for the Jesuits. You know better than that. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've always been, and you guys, I think probably sometimes still think about those things about why did you pick Marquette? We're a pretty high-touch school, and we've never had a big ego about feeling like we don't have to try to sell our school and expose ourselves to people that maybe never in a million years think they would have been coming to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or Marquette for school. So that's one of the things I'm most proud of. It. We have students from Texas and Florida and New York and Utah and all those kinds of places. We're not just a Midwestern school where everybody comes from Wisconsin or Illinois, but we've done a lot of relationship building with advisors at schools that have become feeder schools for us across the country. And that's something that we're going to try to continue to do as best we can.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic school. And I know we're the three of us on this podcast, the hosts, we're biased, but it's a fantastic place to go to school. Excellent education.
Yeah, and
it's a family.
And I never would have thought I would be going to school in Milwaukee when I applied to dental school. But man, Milwaukee is a great town. It's got a lot of culture. It has major league sports. I mean, it's got the Greek Freak right now, for crying out loud. They're the best team in the East.
Yeah, so, guys, I think one of the things that I would respond to in this, and this is something that I think sometimes I have to be careful about. But for your listeners and the people that listen to your podcast, the selection of where you go to school and why you go there has been a big deal for me for a long time. It is frustrating for an old warhorse like me that sometimes looks at social media and blogs and has to swallow hard when there's this sense that it doesn't matter where you go to school, all these schools are the same, and the pressures of trying to talk about, what do you do that nobody else does? I think the answer to that question in a dental perspective is probably nothing. And if we did, everybody else would ask us what we do, and everybody shares best practices anyway. So, I'll give you an example of what I mean without trying to get too wordy. Early clinic entry 15 years ago was a big deal, right? The old idea of a blocked curriculum of not being in a clinical context until you were a junior, that was a pretty rare thing. Marquette was one of the first schools that started to really integrate that idea of getting you engaged in clinical work early. That's not so much a big deal anymore. Everybody does that. So sometimes I think that the thing that makes these decisions happen certainly is who takes you, right? Where's an option for you? And then sometimes I think that the fit and the feel and environment inside a building is the thing that separates one school from another. Certainly, I think, for example, at Marquette, we've always had a strong clinical reputation, right? But there's other schools that have strong clinical reputations as well. So that's one of the reasons why you gotta recruit, and one of the reasons why it's nice to have an opportunity to represent our school on a podcast like this that gets out to a lot of people.
So this is probably an unfair question for you, Brian. It may not be the area that you operate in all the time, but with the understanding that things are changing daily with this pandemic, what changes can dental students expect this fall? And they probably have already had some of them implemented for the summer.
Yeah, I mean, the schools, I would imagine many schools, our school right now is certainly, we're operational. The clinics are open to the degree that they can be. I think it's weird, you guys. If you walked into the dental school right now, it looks like a twister board. There's green dots and red dots and arrows and plexiglass all over the place. It's very, very difficult, challenging at best to figure out how to do clinical dentistry, where droplets and aerosols and saliva and all that stuff are sort of at the core of this whole deal. So I think one of the things students are going to have to be ready for is that they're going to have to be patient. They're going to have to realize that the places they're walking into this fall are different than the places that they saw when they were interviewing back in September, October, and November of last year. It's man, I can only tell people that there's people in all of these schools that have been spending 24 hours a day for months trying to make certain that this educational experience can happen as best it can. But I think you're going to see things have to be flexible. We're all trying to do hybrid kinds of activities where we've got 100 kids in a class. You can't put 100 people in a room in a dental school anymore. It's not acceptable. It'll shut you down. So you're going to have you're going to have half a class maybe doing a class virtually while the other class is in a classroom, and then the next day things will switch. You can have certain times of the day. Just walking into the dental school right now, somebody can't just walk into our building to bring me a transcript. They have to make an appointment. They have to fill out paperwork. They have to have their temperature taken. There's all kinds of things going on. So I think that's the thing that people are going to have to realize, that it's going to look different. Their schedules are going to be a little bit different. And I think for an indefinite period of time. I think that, but what we don't want to do, and certainly I think this is one of the things you're seeing in the papers about all higher education, even at the undergrad level, is I don't think anybody wants to go totally virtual if they can help it, right? I mean, part of the experience of going to college is have that camaraderie of being with people. And it's funny. I've said this a million times. I've heard students in our building, a year ago, maybe, this is an example, say, man, I don't understand why we can't do more stuff virtually. I bet you these guys are so sick of having virtual education now they can't wait to get back into a classroom with people.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a long-winded answer to saying that I think you can't teach clinical dentistry remotely. You have to figure out a way to be able to have patients and keep your buildings open. And so it's just, schools are all trying to figure out the best way to do that and make the experience as positive as we can for the students.
Makes sense.
It's a stressful time for all of us, really, those of us who are in practice and trying to get a grasp on it as well. Has the school, as far as like the clinical stuff, have they had to buy more PPE? Are people running N95 masks? Are you guys running any weird HEPA filtration systems? Have you gone to that extent yet?
I think all of those things and proper PPE. Again, I think all of the decisions that are being made, the number one priority is the safety of both patients, certainly students, and then the faculty and staff that are there to teach people. I think that's why they want to try to keep as many non-clinical people out of that space as they possibly can. PPE is a big issue. Again, everybody in the world's asking for PPE. So just because you order it doesn't mean you're going to get it the next day, right? That's one of the things that we've been dealing with, and maybe you've been dealing with in some ways from your own practices as well. I think all of that stuff is going on. What clinical gowns are okay, which ones aren't. So you've got, people like Conrad Nen and Lisa Koenig, our clinical dean and our academic affairs dean, have been, they're like generals during the war. They're spending all night and all day trying to get these questions answered.
Yeah, it's tricky. Back in the day when we were in clinic, I think we used one white lab coat all day, right? In the clinic, am I right, guys?
Trust me, man. Those days are gone. The other thing you guys know is that as at a dental school, one of the things that makes me a little nervous is that, our patient base are a lot of the kinds of people that are in the crosshairs of really being susceptible to COVID, right? Some of them are older, some of them are don't come from the greatest backgrounds, and some of them have tons of pre-existing conditions. And so to date, I'm not aware of anybody that's been diagnosed as COVID since we've opened up the clinics. But just like basketball and the bubble and baseball and everything else, I can't believe it's not going to happen. At some point it will. And then we'll just have to follow the protocols that we have to follow to make certain everyone's going to be all right.
Yep.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of some of the patients that are seen in the dental school. Some of them are immunocompromised or older population. Do you anticipate that being a little more of a struggle to have an adequate patient flow? It's for clinical experiences, or
I want to say no. I want to say that from our perspective, if you talk about selling points or things that we do, and we talk about Marquette, that's one of the things we've got that's fantastic, right? Where we're not out in the middle of nowhere. We're basically on the western end of the 30th largest city in the country. So patient base has not really ever been an issue, and from what I can understand, there has not been a hesitance or a reticence of any of our patients now that we're open to come back in, and hopefully that'll be maintained now as we move into the fall semester.
Sure.
So Brian, we have a lot of pre-dental students and dental students listen to this podcast. So can you give them just some general information about what makes a strong dental school applicant?
Sure. Yeah, and I don't think, guys, anything I say about that is probably different than what anybody else says. I think that, and maybe way back in podcast number 12, we talked about this stuff, that in our world, in dental admissions, in healthcare professional school admissions, there's topics that if you're old enough, and I am, we reinvent the wheel all the time. So hang with me a little bit. I mean, diversifying the population of people that go to dental school is a huge issue. It's been an issue ever since I came to the dental school in the middle 90s, and it's still an issue today. We don't have an equivalent kind of population of people wanting to be dentists and get into dental school that look like our population. And so we talk a lot about holistic review. When you guys applied to dental school, you were more than just a GPA and a DAT. And I'm always very, very quick to say that doesn't mean that grades and test scores don't matter. Of course they matter, right? Do you guys have kids?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ryder, you have kids?
I have an 8, a 12, and a 14-year-old. Yeah.
And Troy, what about you?
I've got a 23-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Okay, so Troy, let's say your 13-year-old applies to dental school and has a 3.8 GPA. And Ryder's daughter applies and she has a 3.1 GPA, and I take her and I don't take your son. You're not going to be too happy about that, right? So
Right.
One of the things we talk about all the time is, and this might come up a little bit later, is that the pressures that we all have are, how many guys did you go to school with, and women, that weren't necessarily the best as it relates to GPA or test scores? They're the best dentists that you could possibly see now that they're out of school. So,
For sure. Yeah.
To answer your question, I think that we all look for students that have an academic background based on the rigor of the courses they take, the quality of the schools they go to, their trend of performance. That's the new term I use. I don't talk so much about cumulative GPA anymore, right? Everybody has a cum GPA. The question is, how'd they get it? Test scores still are important. I think sometimes maybe you guys are nervous when I'm on this podcast because I talk so much, but
No, that's what we have you on
great.
for.
Standardized test scores can be talked about until hell freezes over, right? Their importance, what do they mean? Are they biased? Are they not? But they're still one piece of the pie, right, Brian? What's more important, good grades or good test scores? They're both important, and they're married. And so when you put them together, they tell us something more than separate stuff. So if it isn't just about academic metrics, then I think the next thing is this idea of, orientation to the profession. Can you convince a committee that you're really passionate about being a dentist? Or are you thinking about dental school because you really wanted to get into med school and couldn't, so now all of a sudden you love dentistry? We want to be in a position where we're looking at the people that are in a world where someone comes up to them and says, you're a freak, man. You want to stick your fingers in someone's mouth for a living. And we want people who say, yeah, let me buy you a cup of coffee and tell you why I want to do that. So I think that's the next piece. And I think sometimes that passion gives admissions committees courage to take a look at somebody maybe academically that's not as strong as somebody else. Is every 3.0 student that never gets a chance to interview, could they not make it through dental school? That's the age-old question that we all think about. I think the other thing is, and you guys lived it, and I never have, you went through dental school. And so I think the idea of thick skin, resilience, how do you deal with someone critiquing what you do? That's one of the things I think over time I've learned that's incredibly important. There's a lot of people that blew through high school with their eyes closed. They got to college, they did really well, but a lot of times they still never learned how to study, and they did very, very well. You get into dental school, and all of a sudden you've got someone telling you that this thing you think is great isn't very good, and you have to do it over again. Remember those times? And so some people relate to that or react to that better than others. And so I think that character piece is another piece that I think good committees and good decisions need to look at that. And then I think character, right? Empathy, compassion. Your patients don't care if you graduated number 1 in the class or number 80. What they care about is how you treat them. And so I think it's not one thing that's the most important. I think it's a combination of all of those things. Character, behavior, academics. I think certainly it starts with academics. You've got to be able to. This is one of the things I saw a little bit on your list is, do good candidates ever not get in? Of course, there's 2,000 people that apply to our school. We only have 100 spaces. So it's not like there's only 100 good candidates, right? And that's why people apply to more than one schools. Different schools apply their philosophies and visions of what they like, sometimes differently than other schools. But by and large, if you're a good candidate, most schools are going to know that. If you're not a very good candidate, most schools are going to know that as well.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's excellent. Do you have an example of anybody that comes to mind that you'd say, this person just did not look like they were going to be a strong candidate, but once we had that interview, once I visited with them, I thought, okay, this is somebody solid.
I think Dr. Neff was that way. Now that I think about it.
Hey, is that why you brought that question up, Marcus?
And honestly, it's true. I think about it, and when I applied to dental school, I was applying to all sorts of schools. Some of them I had no business applying to. I just thought it would be fun to live in Florida, so. But
not right now.
No.
Yeah.
But somebody got me in touch that was at Marquette, said, hey, you need to talk to Brian. And so I made the phone call and initiated it. Brian, you I don't know if you remember this, but you said, come on out, fly out and we'll visit. So I flew out on my own dime, visited with you, and ultimately, I think through that interview, that was probably one of the things that made it possible for me to go to Marquette. Now, I did have pretty good grades my last couple of years of undergrad. I was pretty solid there. I did good on the DAT, but I wouldn't have considered myself a strong dental school candidate. In fact, I got rejected by virtually everybody.
Well, I mean, I think that, I'm not exactly sure I ever know what that means, but it's sort of one of the things I'd say at orientation all the time. And maybe you guys remember, I always get nervous about what I say all the time. And I usually at the end never worry about what I should say because everybody forgets what you say anyway. But, at orientation, when I've got the entire freshman class in front of me for kind of the first time, I say all the time that some of you in this room maybe applied to 10 schools, got accepted to 8 schools, and you chose to come to Marquette. That's awesome. There might be other people in this room that came here because we're the only school that took you, and I'm perfectly okay with that too, right? Someone graduates number 1, someone graduates number 100. Everybody's called doctor when they're done. But to go back to your initial premise, yes, I think one of the things, and you guys, it's interesting because none of us are 20 years old anymore, right? One of the things for any pre-dental students that are listening to this to remember is that a lot of people have moms or dads or dentists that are eras or decades different from they are. And all those people are going to tell you what they went through. And it's not always the same what it went through. I mean, the interview process today, guys, what did you guys graduate? What year?
2003.
You guys are old.
Yeah, 50th birthday coming up.
The interview process is tweaked and changed all the time. And I think, again, this is maybe an opportunity to say something that a lot of people know. I have never, ever been comfortable with, as director of admissions, people saying, "No, Brian, you have the ability to get me in, or you have the ability to keep me out." And we got a committee of people that make those decisions. I've never wanted to have sort of this idea of I'm the power monger, I'm the gatekeeper. So, there's always a vetting process, you guys, that goes on. And there's nobody that gets an opportunity to interview at any dental school is not a good candidate. We're not wasting the time of the admissions committee interviewing people that we know we're never going to take. That's silly. Right. So, but I would also say this, that when you guys ever think about things, and I hope that you do, getting accepted to professional school is an unbelievably difficult thing to do. There's a million people that want to be doctors and dentists that don't have the ability to make it. and some people that are really good. And so there is sometimes, I guess, a little bit of luck, right? Being in the right place at the right time, making your own luck. But you got to be good. So just the way in which good is defined is not necessarily always the same. So yes, I think there are certainly people that interview that on paper are not as good as somebody else that's interviewing, but the way in which they interview and the way in which the committee reacts to them is the difference maker. And that's important for anybody to know when they interview. Just because you interview doesn't mean you're going to get picked. We interview almost 500 people at Marquette. It doesn't take us 500 offers of admission to fill the class.
Right. That's for sure. This might be a question that's a little bit more, I don't know. I guess you would know it because you've lived through it. Now with this, we've had some unprecedented times, of course, this first part of the year.
Yeah.
Kind of talking about maybe those students that are already in school. Okay, the people who are already accepted and already going. When we were forced to shut down our offices, did the school shut down? And how did that affect the students' classwork and clinic time and those kind of things during the shutdown? How do they catch back up and all that stuff?
Totally frustrating. And this is one of those things where I don't think I'm talking on at school, but it was when, at Marquette, we don't have a med school, right? And the dental school is at the top of the volcano. And I think that, probably, it's understandable that the university leadership was focusing on what the hell to do with the undergraduate population of students. And we were at the dental school going, dude, we're not worried about what's going to happen in August. We got a summer session going on, right?
Right, exactly.
March and April, we were shut down. The D3 students that were supposed to be in clinic all summer long missed all that time. And it's pretty funny, you guys. I got my teeth cleaned this afternoon, actually. So my dentist, of course, is talking about, wow, if you're in a dental chair and you need a procedure and you ask it, are you somebody that graduated from dental school in 2020? And they say, yeah, you go, I'd like to have somebody else. It's not like the ADA allowed all of these students to just walk out onto Wisconsin Avenue and hand them a DDS. So
right.
we had a number of D4 students that had to be at school for quite some time to wrap up. I don't remember how you guys were all probably awesome, but it's amazing how many people wait until the last 6, 7, 8 weeks of the school year to get their clinical stuff done when they're graduating. I can tell you right now that a pandemic is a good way to tell you that's not a good strategy.
Right.
So yes, we are absolutely in catch-up mode right now. To try to get these people through what essentially was a summer session that they lost 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks to try to get them back up to speed before the school year starts at the end of August. So for us guys, one of the things that I think is happening at a number of schools, it's definitely happening at Marquette, is we're starting the school year, undergrad and dental school, a week early. In terms of hoping that we can get to, finals time, Thanksgiving, and get people, having finals, and if this thing spikes, to have as much of that, first semester done if it spikes again late in the fall or over the winter time. And, but we're still planning, like we always do, to have everybody back again starting January 4th, right after the new year.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
I just was wondering, because it's been devastating to us, of course. We were shut down from, I think, the 25th of March to the 4th of May here in my practice. And, we laid off all of our staff, basically saw patients on an emergency only, which was pretty rare. People were pretty scared to come in anyway because nobody knew what the heck was going on.
Right.
And so we often thought, as us being on podcasters and kind of, talking more about the pre-dental and then the dental students and stuff like that, how that was affecting them. So thanks for letting us know how that kind of was.
Guys, are you all in Utah?
Marcus and I are in Idaho.
Yeah, and I'm in Utah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know that at least for a long time, I don't think there was any shutdown of the dental schools in Utah at all at the beginning, was there?
I'm not sure about that. We have the University of Utah, and then there's Roseman down there,
Roseman, yeah.
and I'm not sure if they shut down at all through it.
Well, I mean, again, I think it was different state by state, and it's a difference. And you guys, this. I mean, one of the frustrations is I'm not that bright. I'm not a scientist, and if you watch Chris Como on CNN, then the world's falling apart. If you watch Tucker Carlson on Fox, it's like this, that COVID's all a big overblown thing. I don't really know, but I know that colleges and universities, dental schools are obviously taking this extraordinarily seriously. And
Right.
and we talked a little bit about the financial ramifications of all of this stuff are enormous, as you can well imagine. I'm certain that there are college presidents across the country that would love for everything to go remote, but they can't afford to do that. With little Marquette University lost $15 million in the spring when they let everybody out of their housing contracts. That's that's enormous. And so I think all of the steps that are trying to be made to, I think, number one, try to get their college experience as close to what they signed on the dotted line for it to be, in person, rather than, again, parents, right? You're going to send your kid to Harvard if he's going to be at home doing his work on a computer or not. So, it's a little bit different in dental school, right? Somebody can't call tomorrow and say, forget it, I'm going someplace else if they don't have an opportunity to go someplace else. So we haven't had, but I'm imagining in college there's going to be a lot of gap years. People are going to decide that, and my nervousness about gap year, I'll give you a great example, guys. So we have a big white coat ceremony now at Marquette that's usually the last night of freshman orientation. And we were planning a virtual white coat. And the incoming D1 class said, we don't want a virtual white coat. Let's just postpone it, and we'll do it when we can do it live. And I said, that's fine. I'm happy to do that for you. It's your event, except I have no idea what I'm going to be able to, spend, right? We'll try to have your
third year by then.
Yeah, before you graduate, we'll try to have your white coat.
Yeah.
So all of those things are just up in the air, and it's frustrating to not really have good answers for what are very legitimate questions. But I think the decisions that are being made for us at school, we're governed by the obviously university leadership and then the health officials in Milwaukee. We got to follow what they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we applied for dental school in the 90s. That sounds way too long ago, but we're old. We've established that. But I'm still the youngest one on this podcast. I will also mention that. But so when we applied, we would, have everything in by the fall. The fall before we were hoping, the year before we were starting or hoping to start dental school. So we'd find out in about December where we were going or what schools let us in. Can you tell us what the application process is like now, when it starts, when interviews start for pre-dental students that may be listening?
Yeah, and I don't think it's changed maybe in that context as much as you think. So typically the month of June is when people apply to dental school, and there's the ADEA has the old ADSAS application. So if a person applies to 11 schools, they don't have to fill out 11 applications. They fill out, it's kind of like the financial aid form always does. You fill out one application, send it out to Washington, D.C., they process it and send it to the schools that you want. So, broad-based, June, July, August, that's typically when people are applying to dental school. We start at the end of August. Many dental schools start at the end of August, but some have already started their school year already. Some start in September. But typically then decisions on who's going to be invited for fall interviews, that's a big deal. That for us, that typically starts around Labor Day, early September. And so then the fall of the year, September, October, November, That's big interview time. That's when if you're a person applying to dental school, you hope you have a very busy time. Now, it's going to be different this year because if a person's interviewing at 9 schools, they're just going to be sitting at their desk someplace on a computer doing everything virtually. I shouldn't speak that as with certainty as I am. I just don't know any schools that are doing in-person interviewing this fall. And then, one of the things that changed a little bit this year because of the pandemic, I thought it was a little bit silly personally, was AdSAS pushed back the date, the end date, earliest notification date, or when you could apply was always June 1st. This year they pushed it back to June 16th. So they pushed it back 2 weeks. So typically in my time, December 1st is when people would first find out if they were admitted or not. This year now it'll be middle of December, December 15th. So at our school, we basically try to get as much interviewing done between late September and Thanksgiving as we can. In the perfect world, I would love to not have to do any more interviewing after December 1st, December 15th this year. That never happens. We typically do interviewing specifically for out-of-state, non-resident candidates in January as well. So again, so typically you're applying to dental school and taking the DAT 12 to 15 months before you would start school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll get you out of here on this last question, Brian. It's an important one. So the Packers drafted Jordan Love from Utah State, which is a school about an hour north of
I was
me.
waiting to see if maybe that was going to come up or not.
My son's attending Utah State, actually.
Yeah. Is Aaron Rodgers going to finish his career in a Packers uniform?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm a big sports guy, and I every once in a while what I've been doing, because it's a hot topic back here, of course. I think the short answer is probably not. I don't think you draft a guy, move up to get him in the draft, and then sit him. The only way this is going to end up looking good for the Packers, in my opinion, is if Rodgers gets hurt. And I think in the last couple of years, Rodgers has been hurt. I'll tell you, my mind works on different ways. Think of what the Chiefs just did. The Chiefs just gave Mahomes how much? $500 million.
Yeah.
You think they're going to have any other Pro Bowlers on their team for the next 10 years?
No.
They mortgage their entire future for one guy. And like it or not, I think that there's a lot of people that don't think the Packers should have paid Rodgers what they paid him last time for that same reason. But when you put on YouTube and you watch Aaron Rodgers' 25 best passes, I don't want to watch that guy playing quarterback for the Bears. Trust me. So I think the Packers will have Rodgers for 2 more years. Then that last year of his contract, I think they'll probably trade him.
Okay, gotcha. You heard it here first, folks.
What do you think about Jordan? You like him?
Yeah, he was very good in college. I think last year he struggled a little bit, but yeah, he was very good.
Well, they had their eye on him for a long time, and there were a lot of rumors that they were going to take him. It didn't surprise a lot of people out here at all when they did it. When they made that thing that the Packers have moved up, everybody here knew they were going to pick Love if he was still on board. So we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, I really like Rodgers, but it'd be kind of cool to have a local guy play for the Packers and play well. So
we've been spoiled. We've had pretty great quarterbacks for the last 26 years in Green Bay, and that's the pressure Love feels, I'm sure.
I'd love to have some good quarterbacks in Miami. That's my team.
It's been a while. Dan Marino thought it was simple, right? He was going to get to the Super Bowl every year after his rookie year, and he never touched one ever again.
Yeah. Man, they haven't had a good. The Dolphins haven't had a good quarterback since Bob Greasy, have they?
Oh, come on, Ryder. Come on. You're hurting me.
It's brutal. That does start to show your age.
Yeah. All right. Well, Brian, we really appreciate you joining us tonight and give us so much good information. And can you tell everyone if they have any questions where they can contact you? Is it best to contact the school,
Sure.
or what's
Yeah,
the best way to
no,
go about it?
I always, if anybody would ever want to get in touch with us, you certainly can call us. But my contact information, my email is the best. So first name dot last name. So Brian, Brian dot Trecek, Trecek at Marquette.edu. Be happy to hear from you. And whether
Awesome.
we're in the office or working remote, we're doing the best we can to service applicants as best we can.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you're applying to dental school, if you're a pre-dental student, whatever, give Marquette a good solid look, because you will be happy that you did. This has been episode 50 of the Dental Realist podcast. We appreciate y'all joining us, and we will talk to you on episode 51. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.